ultimately, the projects we have in the Linux Foundation Energy, they have to be of a good quality. At least that's what we're aiming for. And everybody that is participating, I know in the LF Energy projects, are really keen on not only growing the community, get the adoption in place, but also make a good project, a good product in that sense. Security, of course, in the energy sector is already, from historical reasons, important. Oftentimes, reliability is one of the key performance indicators. And so I see that with LF Energy, there's a huge focus on improving security through the collaboration with OpenSSF, and really by encouraging the projects to make steps like a best practices badge and evaluating the process.
Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and we are here at Open Source Summit in Bilbao, Spain. And today we have with us Nico Rikken, Open Source Ambassador at Alliander. Nico, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, and there are so many things to talk about today, but from a perspective of security, you folks are writing like very, very critical piece of code, and there is no room for mistake. So I mean, of course, as I said, there's a little bar, but you have to make sure that code quality is really good. Yeah. So I want to hear from your perspective, like open source and Alliander, that how do you look at security?
You are already addressing the integral approach, right, for security. And yeah, for sure, that is something that we have to take into account. Code doesn't become secure by itself. So we have to have processes in place. We have to create awareness. Oftentimes, there's a lot of focus in our organization also on bringing awareness to the developers. But then at the end, you want to check, right? What do we have in place? What is it maybe also getting deployed? But oftentimes that is not something you can see in an open source project because you don't know how it's being deployed and how it's configured. You can maybe avoid misconfiguration, maybe set out recommendation, help out configuration, but typically that's beyond the scope. So really checking, making sure that the code is mature, that the code is secure, that you have all the processes in place. I think that's the main thing.
What kind of culture for your teams, what kind of processes are there internally to ensure, once again, given the scope of mistakes there in the code with bugs and all those things, to still ensure that the hygiene of code is good?
It may be good to first say that we have different applications about the various applications that we have, and that also implies the levels of security. When we talk about the grids, right, we have systems in place that really control switchgear that determine if there's a grid has power or not. Of course, that is critical infrastructure that has to be secured through configuration, continuous monitoring. That's also like with cyber, right? It's really security is utmost important. But also on the other spectrum, we have, HR software, we have business analytics going on. So these are less critical. Of course, they might have still huge impact also financially, but it's not the availability, for example, is not as much of an issue. Now, we are first off trying to identify what application is to what level of security. And that is something we do for all our applications internally to gauge for how is it set with the availability, with the confidentiality, and also the integrity, right? These three pillars. And if we know that, we have at least a level of quality by which each team has to abide by. And this is something that was sort of in place already over, years. But really this year we stepped up this effort with a team we call Mission Control, which is outside of the development teams, but has the main goal to, on the one hand, see how it's done with the quality, but also help the teams to really improve.
If we look at the life cycle of the code that is written, of course, you folks started doing open source recently, so you do have like a lot of proprietary code base. Within every company has some proprietary, some open source. What I want to understand is like when you write proprietary code, the users are internally, the feedback loop is different versus when you write code for open source, because you yourself are not even deploying it. You have put the code out there, someone else is deploying. The only difference with internal versus external is that internally, whatever system you have, you'll get feedback from the user team. Externally, they might actually put a fix themselves, hey, this is so can you talk about
Yeah, certainly. And I'd like to highlight that with one example we have, that is Power Grid model. So this is a calculation engine we use to calculate the grid. And this is critical in the sense that we use it for lots of analyses. So maybe not as a cyber type of security, but at least the integrity, the results have to be sound. And what I see with that project in particular is that there's a lot of mature development going on. The team is really stepping up their game for internal use, but also externally. Like, we want to make the best product as possible. So they verify all the calculations for each release against other software doing something similar, against manual written calculations, to ensure that the calculations, the main purpose of this software, is sound, and also providing a good API for usage to prevent misuse, and also add documentation and whatever. So really step up the quality level of this product. And I think the open source nature of this really helps. Also because you don't know what the other one is, how it is being used. So you're forced to sort of take the extra step to make it good.
Right. And we are adding one more layer, that even your open source code base is not going just on a specific GitHub repository or GitLab repository. It's part of Linux Foundation energy as well. So talk a bit about what impact that has on the quality and the security of the code base.
Yeah, also another major impact, I think, that before we had open source projects. Of course, taking a project from internal to open source projects, open source code, means that we have to be sure about the quality. We check, and once it's open source, the continuous development, security is important there. But what you see with it being open under the governance of the Linux Foundation Energy is that Linux Foundation Energy really puts security as a priority. And so every year we have a project lifecycle, which it's good to have all these projects go to determine which level are you. Are you still in an incubation phase, or are you going to be up until graduate? That determines not only the adoption you have in terms of other participants, but also the quality level, and that is tied to security. So for a project to grow on this maturity level, they have to have meet certain security standards dictated by the OpenSSF best practices, for example. And this is a reminder, a yearly reminder for a project to say, okay, we really need to step up our game in terms of security to further the project also for other aspects.
Can you also talk about the importance of the whole software bill of materials, or SBOMs, not only just for internal consumption, but also for external parties?
One example you could do is just take the source code and build everything internally, secure everything internally, and then it would be only for Alliander's purpose. Our main goal is to push every effort regarding securing the software out there, and to ensure that the product, like a Docker container or a Python package, that is secure. And then we can internally maybe do some small verifications to ensure it. But then we can use it right away because we have guaranteed the quality and the security on a community level. Now, when you use it and you want to know, okay, what else is in here, and is there still something that is current? All these libraries, are they the latest version? Do they have known vulnerabilities? Then you need a report of everything that is in there, especially with Docker containers, because oftentimes you all get an operating system layer with all the libraries that are necessary to run the software. And having an SBOM that specifies what is in there is really helpful in this case, because you can run that analysis of, is this still current at any time as long as you have that ASBO.
When we look at security, how much awareness do you see is there within developers team? Because security for a very long time has always been seen as someone else's problem. Yes, of course you have to maintain the code hygiene and everything else, but there are always different security teams. Second problem is that developers really don't like to talk to security team because they slow things down, because they will find something and there will be delay. So there's always been a kind of pushback from both teams. But then we are also seeing emergence of new cultural shift, DevSecOps, the whole shift left movement. So talk about the impact of these movements on the security of open source code base.
This friction has been there for as long as in my technical career. And it used to be that you have maybe a yearly audit with security and check also configuration, how is the architecture set up, and also go through the code if necessary. We have much more tooling in place to have an early warning of security findings, whether it's just something wrong in the code or about dependencies. But then still, it has to be followed up on. And I think this is the next step will be to push this even further left. I don't know if this is a good phrasing, but I guess the main idea is to make it easier, to streamline for the developers, staying up to date with dependencies, for example, and getting in the editor already a highlight like, hey, maybe here's a risk of SQL injection, and to point that out, and ideally I'd already address a fix once where the developer is coding.
Now, when we look at Alliander, the one difference also is that you folks not only work in a very well-regulated, compliance industry, but you folks also like part of public sector also. So you have bigger responsibility there. What does that also mean? Because that adds another layer of responsibility to ensure the code quality, the hygiene and health and security.
A lot of tests would be the most practical way to put this. We have written the software ourselves to read out smart meters to control public lighting. That was out of a necessity to drive innovation, to also phase out other systems that were in place from historic reasons. And so it is then we have to ensure that this software is sound. It has to be performant. It also has to meet all the requirements in terms of security, but also other compliance. And it starts with a lot of architectural design, but also good tests in place to continuously ensure that this software is meeting what it needs to do.
I also want to talk a bit about the cultural aspect, especially after Alliander kind of playing a very big role in creating LFE. So talk a bit about how the culture within Alliander changes. By culture, I mean the developer culture, because now you folks are doing a lot of open source, which is going in through the community, which does mean the way developers used to work is a bit different than they work now.
There are already quite some developers that are really outgoing. They love the open source community. They're really engaged. They might even be in some communities. And I, of course, directly some colleagues come to mind, but it's not for everybody. It was really nice that we do at the Open Source Program Office quite some internal advocacy for open source and really trying to help developers and teams get the benefit from open source involvement. And then one of them is meeting new employees and saying to them, like, we do open source at Alliander. And then you see these developers that come from someplace else and they say, yeah, I like using open source and I use it at home. I'm involved in some communities. And it's really great that you give me this opportunity to do that at Alliander as well. And I'm going to find out in my work how I can best use the open source opportunities. So they're really inspired to get the benefit from being involved in open source. And I think that enthusiasm will convince others over time what the value of open source really can bring. And of course, the teams that are working, publishing open source projects, they are really seeing the value of getting involved with open source, especially a network like LF Energy we are involved with, to work together to get a better code, to get more use cases covered. So it's really energizing for everybody.
A lot of people don't realize it, but you are critical to this modern world. Without energy, the whole world will come to a standstill. It would exist. But then there is a lot of transformation going within the energy sector, and that transformation is also because the way we are consuming, the way we are actually every consumer, because of solar, everything is also becoming a producer. EVs and all those things are changing the flow of electron. We are also looking at sustainable sources of energy, and I want to bring it back to security. Also means the sustainability of the source code of the software also. So I want to tie these two things together, and I want to ask you, if you look at the larger picture, how does sustainable open source can also ensure our sustainable future when we do talk about this energy transition?
As you said, the renewables are changing the whole landscape in terms of energy distribution, the business we are in. We can no longer take energy from power plants and just distribute it as is. We have to deal with energy that is weather dependent and is coming from all places, right? Households are generating energy and consuming at the same time, businesses, everybody. And so we have to enable the proper sharing of energy, not only through cables, but also the digital infrastructure to enable the markets, the coordination mechanisms. And for us, that means a lot of digitization. But that means that all the other parties, whether these are businesses, whether these are consumers, have to, or maybe not have to, but ideally should participate in digitizing and getting active in optimizing, steering this weather-dependent fluctuating energy. So I see a lot of opportunity for standards, for software packages that everybody can implement and adopt to make this better, and to work with to make this practical. So, for example, we have OpenStaff in the LF Energy project, in the LF Energy Foundation. OpenStaff is about predicting energy locally. Of course, we use this as a grid operator, but a business can use this, even a consumer can use this. It doesn't matter because the software is rather small in terms of footprint and is really reusable. So this is one example. We also need standards to interoperate and communicate about all this energy usage.
Can you talk about even if it is small, the role that you see LF Energy or these projects are playing in beating this big challenge that is facing us all?
The challenge is immense. There's no denying that. And we need all the solutions we can get and get them fast in place, right? We need to move things forward. And the fact that we can use open source and scale it as best as possible, I think can be a huge accelerator. LF Energy already has plenty of projects that can be developed, can be implemented worldwide. And maybe it needs a bit of touching up to be applicable everywhere. But I mean, that's more, those are the smaller fixes, I think. And the general application is already in place. Sure, if you look at the landscape page for LF Energy, there's plenty of applications missing. But there's already so much open source software that we can use. And I think we should really ramp up the usage of solutions that support sustainable energy. The fact that we still are struggling to get all the flexibility there, I think we should be able to better integrate renewable energies than we do now. And yeah, open source solutions, they scale. That's the main thing. And LF Energy has, as you said, surely I think also instilled on me the urgency of the climate crisis and the role that foundations like LF Energy and open source can play in that. And I think open source solutions being scalable, being applicable worldwide should be part of that solution.
Nico, thank you so much for taking time out today and, of course, talk about not only Alliander but also a larger picture of the importance of having these security practices in place to ensure code hygiene, health of a project, and also the larger impact Linux Foundation Energy is having on our world. Thanks for sharing all those insights, and I would love to chat with you again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.